natural quiet now, so probably a good time to start. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Just a check in the back, how's this volume level? Awesome, great. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Rev1 Labs, part of Rev1 Ventures. We're an investor startup studio in Central Ohio with the goal of helping entrepreneurs build great companies. I'm Sarah Risch. I'm a managing director for venture development team here at Rev1, and I'm joined today by Teri and Prasad, who I'll actually let go ahead and introduce themselves because they can probably tell the story a bit better than I do, but they're with DASI Simulations. And DASI has the goal of being the future of structural heart care. Teri?
Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I have heard that this is the largest turnout since COVID, so thank you for sharing your morning with us. It's really quite nice to see everybody's face and to be able to communicate with everybody in person. We've not met many of the people in here, but we've spoken to quite a few over the last 2 years. So my name is Teri Sirset. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of DASI Simulations. My background is predominantly in medical device sales, cardiovascular and neurovascular. I'm a registered dietitian by trade, but left that a long time ago to go into the sales industry. And most recently, I was with another startup company in new product development, sales, and marketing. And I had the fortunate experience of meeting Dr. DASI at a convention back in 2018.
Thank you, Teri. Good morning to everybody. My name is Prasad DASI. Actually, I was, among these. I was in that room. We first moved into Rev1 just last year, and we spent a good deal of time in this area. So it's good to be back here talking to each of you. I'm a Ph.D. in engineering. I got my Ph.D. from Georgia Tech in 2004, and I researched in the area of heart valve, structural heart valve engineering. And I started as a faculty at Colorado State, and then I joined Ohio State University as a professor in biomedical engineering in 2015. And I continued that position until the end of 2019. Currently, I am the CTO, partner in crime with Teri at DASI Simulations. I also have a professor appointment at Georgia Tech and Emory University. So I do go a little bit back and forth between Columbus and Georgia. And we met in 2018, and I'm sure Teri will tell you all about it in the next few minutes.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. So today we're here to talk about DASI Simulations, and this group is using computer vision and AI to do predictive modeling for structural heart procedure planning. And in doing that, they're improving patient outcomes while also reducing healthcare costs. So let's go ahead and dive into the questions. You mentioned it was, 2018 when you guys met?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, go ahead and tell me how you guys got started.
So I love our founder story. I think it's a very large part of who we are and our company culture. I've been told it's a little whimsical, but I think that's fun. So back in 2018, when I was representing this other startup company, we were at TCT in San Francisco. And in May of 2018, my daughter graduated from Ohio State. I was born in Ohio, in Cleveland. I'm a Buckeye fan through and through, but I live in California, and so I had to coerce my daughter to go to Ohio State because she did not want to leave the sunny southern state of California. But nonetheless, she went there, and my dad had graduated from Ohio State as well. So I was there, and I was representing a different company, and Prasad and his students were passing by the booth where I was standing. And of course, being this exuberant Buckeye fan that I am, I was very excited to see him and all of the students with their Ohio State backpacks because we were in San Francisco and they were very far away, and I was very, very excited. So I ran up to them and I was like, oh my God, you guys are from Ohio? And they were like, yeah, we were from Ohio. Okay, I don't know why that's such a big deal, but we're from Ohio. And so I pulled them over to my booth to show them what I had on the table, and I actually had simulation products, though not near the complexity as the ones that we have now. And Prasad was very intrigued because the models that I had on the table were transcatheter models, and he happened to be doing research in the transcatheter field. And so, with a little bit of persuasion, and about a week later, Prasad called me and had said that he was very impressed by what I was doing and what I had. And Ohio State purchased several of the models that I had, and he took them into the lab, and he continued the development of the technology. And about a year later, I had gone back, and I'm not going to lie, I was going to a football game, but I thought this is going to be a great opportunity for me to meet Prasad for the second time only, and go to lunch and say thank you. And so we did. We went to lunch, and it was great. And he had asked if I would like to see the technology that was being built from the models that he had purchased from my company, and I was very intrigued. So he took me into the wet lab, and he showed me all this amazing technology, and then he translated it to the computer simulations. And of course, I wasn't sure what I was looking at, but he tried to explain in the best layman's terms that he could. And I was so intrigued by what his goal was, and his goal was, to save lives and reduce complications for patients that are undergoing structural heart procedures. And so there was this magical moment between the two of us where he said, "Can I show you a pitch deck? I recently put together a pitch deck with this technology, and I'm looking for somebody to help me. Maybe take this and commercialize this and take this out and put this into the hands of physicians. And your background is such that you've been in sales for a very long time, new product development. I think we have a great synergy here." So he showed me the pitch deck, which we jokingly call the big red pitch deck now, which is so far from the pitch decks that we present to everybody today. And I was mesmerized by the technology. And he said, "Do you want to start a company with me?" And I thought I was the luckiest person on the planet, because what I was witnessing was technology that I knew would be life-changing. It took me all of maybe the football game and maybe a day or two afterwards to realize that this was where I was supposed to be in my life. And I called Prasad and I said, "If you'll take a chance on me, I know you don't know me very well, but I can do this for you. I can sell this, and we can make a company out of this." And that's how we met each other, and then the rest is history.
Wonderful, thank you, Teri. So yeah, that's very much at the idea stage when you started out. What's it like working with a very early stage startup?
I can start, and maybe Teri, you can add in. It's actually, I would say, starting this company along with Teri is probably the most rewarding experience I've ever had throughout my entire professional career. Just the thought that some idea in a person's mind, or actually we are almost like one person, but two people's mind, an idea can actually come out into the world or into the universe to help the patients and save lives. That drives us every day. So that is how it is like, your own ideas coming out, and the notion that you can make that real impact is a big part of how it's like in this early stage. The other big thing is all of the young talent that we have in our team. As we build the team, every person that comes into the team really shares that special connection, and we all have this joint vision that we are working towards. So that is another awesome experience to undergo. Teri, you can add.
I would agree with you. For me, it has also been one of the most exhilarating projects, experiences, call it whatever you would like, that I have ever done in my life. And being in sales, I thought that closing a big deal at the Cleveland Clinic was probably the highlight of my career, but it pales in comparison to what we are trying to do and trying to accomplish. And I second with what Prasad says with the team that we have. We are a small team, but we're a mighty team. And just the level of talent that they bring to the table and the dedication toward the vision that Prasad and I had very early on, everybody's on the same page. And for me, you know, there's always highs and there's always lows in a startup, and I feel them. Some days I feel like I'm on cloud 9, and some days I feel like I'm trying to get out of the pool from in the deep end and just catch a breath. So the ups and downs are well worth it because the team is so strong, and I feel really, really grateful to have such wonderful people on the team.
Wonderful. Yeah, so this started with really an idea, an idea founded on really strong science. How and when did you guys realize that this meant a significant market and clinical need?
Yes, so I can take that question. This goes back to 2015 when I just started at Ohio State as a faculty member. My lab was in the Davis Heart and Lung Research Institute, and the one great thing about Wexner Medical Center and Ohio State overall is that there's this spirit of co-mingling engineers with clinicians, and that made all the difference. My lab was actually in the hospital building, and Juan Crestinello, who was the chief of cardiac surgery back then, he invited me and my team, graduate students and postdocs, to participate in these heart team meetings. And TAVR, which is called transcatheter aortic valve replacement, was picking up nationally as the future, the next breakthrough for treating patients who need valve replacement, particularly their aortic valves. So myself and my team, we would be with the heart team of Ohio State, looking at how decisions are made to treat these patients. And then there would be these monthly M&M meetings, and M&Ms are not the candies, they're the morbidity and mortality meetings. And we would be participating in those meetings as well. And one of these, in one of those days, I think it was late 2015, there was one patient where the imaging was just fine. It seemed like a routine transcatheter aortic valve replacement case. But then a few weeks later, I find that this patient actually had a terrible, fatal complication. Essentially, specifically what happens sometimes is that when you deploy these stents into the patient, because of the specific nature of their anatomy, their coronary arteries can instantly get occluded as soon as you blow up that valve stent. And that was the moment that me and my team realized, and we were looking at the imaging, and we were looking at all of the efforts the doctors were doing to save that person's life. That was the moment we realized that we can actually predict these. As engineers, we can actually develop a software tool that can simulate the interaction of these devices with the patient and predict that outcome. And to me, going back to the question, that is a realization that there is actually a need, because this is not just happening at one center. In fact, this is happening everywhere, and the complications are not just one complications. There are many complications. Nobody is able to predict them, but we can if we just develop the predictive models. And that is what my research was about, and that is what my students were working on, and that's what we were doing in the lab with the models that Teri was developing in her previous startup. So that's basically how it all began.
Awesome, wonderful. So thinking back to the beginning, what do you know now that you wish you had known then?
We were talking about this yesterday, and Prasad had such a cute, candid answer and said, I'm glad I didn't know anything, because I don't know that I would have done this. This was been a fearful experience from the very beginning. And I thought that was fun, and I agreed with him on many aspects. But I think that what I wish I would have known in the beginning was to trust myself a little bit more. I reached out because I was new doing this, and I reached out to previous mentors, previous people that I'd worked with, and I let a lot of the noise come into my decision making, and we had a very solid path that we really felt very strong and confident about. But because we were both new at doing this, we reached out and we talked to many people, and I felt we got a little bit sidetracked, actually. We let some of that noise infiltrate the thought process that we had. And so in looking back, I wish that I could have, not listened as strongly to some of the advice that we were given, and I wish I would have utilized my gut a little bit more. I found that my gut was right. It generally is.
Awesome. And well, my next question was about what advice you have for founders in bringing their idea to reality. Is there anything further, or is it that really listen to your gut, follow your path?
Yeah, I would say that, really listen to your gut. Take your idea. If you feel that your idea is strong, listen to that, and find an entity. We were so grateful to have found Rev1, who believed in us right from the start, which is an interesting story. I reached out to Rev1 just to find office space, not realizing, because I didn't really know what they had to offer, and they wrapped our arms around us as a startup, and Rev1's been so hopeful for us. But reach out to an entity, reach out to, maybe not 10 people, but reach out to 1 or 2 people that you really trust that can help to guide you. But nonetheless, weed through what your thought process is and check that against your own personal feelings and your own gut feelings.
Great. So DASI Simulations is in use at Ohio State's Wexner Medical Center, as well as Piedmont Hospital down in Atlanta. What kind of discussions are going on as far as potential cohorts to increase clinical indications and further validate the technology?
Yes, I can take that question. So we are actually in use now, not just Ohio State and Piedmont, but over 20 different hospitals across the United States use us almost on a daily basis. And these are basically complex cases that physicians are nervous about. All of these centers, and some of them are really esteemed, prestigious academic institutions like Harvard, Cedars-Sinai. We're also talking to Cleveland Clinic, Baylor in Texas, Texas Heart Institute. We are not only helping their current cases where they need our help, but these centers are collaborating with us to further validate our clinical technology in terms of fit, as well as validating all of the other features that we are rolling out as we speak. So our base technology is about simulating the interaction between the device and the patient's unique anatomy. And then the second step is, from that simulation, predict the adverse outcomes that are possible for that patient. So many of these centers have a lot of historical data on adverse outcomes. So we are able to develop IRB approved clinical studies that are retrospective as well as prospective to further help us get these publications out. And many of these physicians actually are going to conferences and highlighting our technology, not only as case reports, but also as research studies, as well as live cases. So we've actually had almost 3 live cases over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 months, where a patient, and the most recent live case was a patient in Vancouver, and the conference was in Chicago, and then our technology was highlighted live, essentially showing how this predictive modeling can help them make real-time decisions, and then they would see that it actually works out fine.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you guys have some really great champions at these institutions. How did you go about getting connected to those early customers, those early adopters? Especially these customers are surgeons, so probably hard people to reach. How did you manage that?
I can take that. From a sales perspective, I can honestly tell you that this has been one of the easiest sales transitions that I've ever experienced in my life, because the technology is so necessary and we are filling a need that is bigger than I think what we both imagined when we first started. And so we have probably one of the best, most world-renowned medical advisory boards. And Dr. Vinod Thorani is the head of our medical advisory board, has worked with Prasad, has known Prasad for a very long time. And so he was instrumental early on in helping us select other members of our medical advisory board. And I knew that while there's a need for this technology in facilities that don't do the same type of volume as perhaps the Cleveland Clinic or Baylor, that's probably where a good majority of the complications we will find. We also know that this is a copycat industry, and when the bigger facilities utilize this type of technology, that it's going to be a trickle-down effect. So we strategically sought out, with Dr. Vinod Thorani's advice, who to select to be on our MAB. And then from there, these physicians are the physicians that are doing the live cases, that are presenting at TCT and ACC, and have really become advocates for DASI. And at these conferences, now that they've opened up since COVID, we have had a small booth, we've had small tables, and I've never experienced in my lifetime over the course of my sales career, physicians bringing their colleagues to me. Generally, I have to track them down, and it takes weeks to get into their offices, but they're bringing their colleagues to us, scheduling calls at 6 a.m., wanting to make sure that their colleagues see what we're able to provide, because the technology really is fulfilling a pain point that every one of the cardiovascular surgeons, interventional radiologists, interventional cardiologists are feeling and seeing. And so from that, strategically aligning our medical advisory board, and then the organic growth just by physician to physician has been extremely helpful for us. And then just recently, we are implementing a sales strategy where we have onboarded 37 independent sales reps. And so almost at the same time that the secondary level of organic growth is happening amongst physicians, we have a team, an army of independent sales reps that are blanketing the US, and the word is just almost getting out simultaneous.
That's wonderful, and a great example of building a board to help sort of expand the capabilities of your team. Maybe another question related to team. So I know you guys have leveraged the interns available at both Ohio State and Georgia Tech to help do some of the work here, and it's really a win-win situation where DASI benefits as well as the interns. What would you say goes into having successful intern experience?
Sure, that's a great question. Last year when we were much smaller and we were here right before we took one of the rooms back here at Rev 1, we talked about utilizing Rev 1's interns, the ability to have these interns, and I was a little bit freaked out at that point, thinking I'm not even sure I know what I'm doing. Then how am I going to teach 4 or 5 interns what what they need to do? And so we realized early on that these are very bright students, and if we had a plan, they were with us for 12 weeks, and we knew ahead of time what our intentions were, that we would be able to roll out that plan. But for us, it was really important to make sure that, obviously we needed help. We're a very small team, to utilize the talents that they were bringing to us, but also to expose them to what is it like to work with a startup. They're seeing things. We let them sit in on investor meetings and our team meetings, our management team meetings, and they're hearing and learning about all of the intricacies and the ins and outs of a startup. And so making sure that we're listening to them so that we're able to understand what they want to get out of the internship program so that we can match those needs. But then doing some cross-functional training where, maybe our marketing interns are learning a little bit about what our engineers are doing, and our engineers, maybe didn't realize that they liked social media. So we're cross-training them so that when they leave, they really know what they like, but they also know what they don't like. I had an intern just this past summer tell me that I really thought that I was going to like the business end of marketing, but I really like the sales portion of this. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yes, I can certainly add. I mean, we are at the intersection of medicine, computer technology, engineering, and obviously business. And that intersection has created so much opportunity for young minds to really find where they fit and where their own passions drive them into this intersection. And we were amazed to find that it's even though interns come in with they're generally just undergraduate students, they are just so bright, and we have attracted interns not only from the big universities but also from community colleges, and each one of them has just surpassed expectations in terms of what they have delivered, and at the same time, vice versa, they have actually transformed their own worldview and their own confidence level, and many of them are actually hoping to join us as full-time employees, and some have already.
They have. Some from last summer have joined us. It's been great.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so in thinking about maybe when you started out and where you are now and what you thought that sort of straight line would look like, I'm guessing everyone in the room knows it probably wasn't a straight line. That's not how entrepreneurship works. So what type of pivots did you guys end up doing across your journey?
I love that question because we just had this conversation last week where we said we are not a linear growing company. We've pivoted a few times. And I'll start off by saying that the technology was so great. We really did start off with the intentions of reducing complications and thus reducing costs within hospitals. When a patient comes back for a repeat intervention within the first 30 days, the hospital absorbs those costs. Each complication has a price tag associated with it. Things like permanent pacemaker can be $15,000 to $20,000. Then you can't put a price on death, right? So that was our goal. But over the course of the last, I would say 8 or 9 months, we've realized that there's many patients that are coming back now for a second surgery because the surgery, is fairly new. It came out around 2005, this minimally invasive TAVR surgery. They really started picking up procedure volume in the United States in 2012. And now these patients have to have another valve put in. And once the valve's put in, you can't just go in and take it out and just replace it nice and easily. It becomes part of the anatomy, and so you have to put another valve inside of that valve. And so we realized that these physicians need to do shared decision making with their patients. And from the onset of diagnosis, when they're first diagnosed with aortic stenosis or any other heart valve disease, they have a few choices. And a younger patient generally will suggest going to a very invasive open heart surgery. It's called a sternotomy, where they open the chest from the top to the bottom. And it's a 30-day recovery, and it's a difficult surgery it doesn't matter what the age of the patient. But patients are smart, and they don't want that anymore, and they want to be able to have this minimally invasive surgical procedure, but there's inherent risks with that as well. So we realized early on that we're able to simulate both of those procedures to be able to give the physicians more information so that they can share that with their patients and the families and utilize shared decision making and give them the risks associated with both procedures, knowing that later on they're going to have a second or maybe a third. Some of them maybe even need a fourth valve. And we're able to do what we call now lifelong patient management. So it's not just about reducing complications and costs in hospitals. When patients are diagnosed, they're heart patients for life. And this is giving them the opportunity and the physicians the opportunity to know what will happen a second and a third time so that they can make the decision the first time correctly and try to avoid as many complications and try to give these patients really great hope for what's going to happen in the future years to come.
Yes, and maybe I can just add to that like an analogy. So in terms of pivot, how backup cameras and these cameras that you can put around a car can help see the blind spot. So that was what we were originally trying to sell, is technology that can show the blind spots to the physicians of what they might actually bump into. But the physicians were really asking for a Tesla that would have, automatic driving capabilities, and not just look at blind spots, but tell them exactly how to get to where they're trying to go from A to B. So that's basically an analogy of what Teri just mentioned. Is we pivoted how we package our technology. Our technology can indeed tell them how to go from point A to point B throughout the patient's lifetime, as opposed to just looking at what the blind spots are for that first operation.
It's a great analogy.
Awesome, thank you. So I do want to give the audience a chance to ask any questions. So do we have a mic for that, Ashley? Any audience questions right now?
Don't make them too hard, it's pretty early though.
I have a little one, not hard, don't for Dr. DASI. So going from being an academic, so your training was in science and your experience was in academia, what was it like to switch over to entrepreneurship and commercialization?
So it's, like I mentioned, life transforming, I would say. Just in academia, the goal is just to publish and hope that your knowledge that you have sent out through publications will eventually, somebody will read that and then and folks in the industry would acquire that knowledge and then build something to help make the patient care better. But that used to be how academia generally operated. For me, we did the publications part, but then we can almost see that the technology can actually be developed in the lab and then translated directly into the startup. So taking that direct step, like why wait for somebody else? We can do it ourselves. And we have the team. We are the experts in the lab, and we are working with the experts not only in the OR, but also in the business world. So it makes a whole lot of sense for more academic labs to think in this new way, that the impact, it's really up to you to bring the impact yourself. And it's the most rewarding thing you can do in terms of educating the future as well as bringing better care for patients.
Wonderful. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you for sharing the story. You literally work with life and death with your tool, but with such a ingrained industry with some big players as well as physicians that have been trained and learned, you're coming in with a tool that may disrupt their business model, their thought process. How do you deal with that, trying to bring your startup to market?
That's a great question. So we are very disruptive technology, as you can imagine. And one of the things that I have found is that we are challenging the status quo, right? So we have many physicians out there that have been doing this for a really long time. Cardiac surgeons are notoriously right, and they don't like to be challenged often. However, that being said, we've been very fortunate in that they recognize that this does better patient outcomes and gives them these, like Prasad had mentioned, these blind spots, these tools to see these blind spots. And so where I thought that it would be a little bit more challenging in changing mindset, I'm finding that that's not the challenging part at all. The physicians, every physician that we will present to will more than likely have had an outcome that haunts them, and they'll start to think about, gosh, if I would have used this technology, could my outcome have been different? And we walk away with 1 or 2 or 3 retrospective cases that we will run our simulations on, and indeed will show them that we could have predicted what happened. It's pretty enlightening and eye-opening, and then they'll start to think about cases that are coming up that they're a little bit nervous about, and they'll give us those cases as well. So I think always when you're trying to bring new technology, and this is not a new device. This is not just a device that has a little bit of a better feature to it. We kind of talk about the robot that was introduced into the hospitals, the Da Vinci robot. People thought they were crazy, but once it's in a place, other places want to use it too because they're showing that the outcomes are so good. So I think initially, shaking up the status quo with this very disruptive technology has been a little bit challenging, but we've been doing this now for a year and it's really starting to pick up. Prasad had mentioned 20 or 21 facilities across the United States that we're currently doing retrospective or prospective cases, but we're in conversations with almost 40. And there's about 750 centers here in the United States. And just in 8 or 9 months, I think that's really quite a testament for the team that we have and for the technology that's out in the hands of the physicians. It's a great question.
I can quickly add another point is that at the end of the day, we are really fortunate that the physicians and the remarkable clinical teams that work throughout the United States, they are really passionate about the patients and they show up for work just because they care so much about the patients. And when they see a disruptive technology that can help patients, they basically they drive the change because they believe in better care, and that is what is fueling everything. And just last week, when we were in Texas, at Texas Heart Institute, a really renowned physician there stood up to the administrator and said, this is exactly what we need. And in fact, the secondary outcome is that you're going to actually save money and it's actually going to be better outcomes for, lower costs for the hospital. But the driving thing is better outcomes for the patients.
Any further questions?
So I think you just kind of touched about one of the things I find that's hardest in the startup world is understanding pricing, how to price. So, and I think you kind of headed in that direction. I'm real interested to have you share, how did you determine I don't need to know what your price is, but necessarily, how did you figure out what the pricing should look like? Should it be a one-time? Should it be a recurring revenue? And then in addition, how did you figure out what right was for work price?
Gosh, that's such a loaded question, and it's a good question, it really is. And I feel like you have been planted in the audience for some reason. There's a few investors out there. That is a great question. So we are a SaaS-based model. My goal is to be subscription because we do not want the hospitals to do procedure rationing. This is disruptive technology, and everybody in this room deserves to have the technology utilized on you or your loved ones. Doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter the complexity. There's been many times these cases that come to us that are retrospective cases are cases that the physicians didn't think would be an issue. They're ones that they thought would sail right on through the procedure, and they're the ones that caught them off guard because you can't tell that interaction between a stent and a patient's anatomy, and once it's deployed, you can't go back and take it out. So it has been a little bit challenging. We're in a macroeconomic crisis right now. Hospitals are cutting back. But what we're finding is that there's a company out there called HeartFlow, and HeartFlow is also disruptive technology, and thanks to HeartFlow, they've paved the way for us a little bit with regard to subscription-based pricing in the hospital. And so our regulatory status and our reimbursement status now is such that we're able to sell into the market under what's called the 21st Century Cures Act. But that gives us limited indications for use, and from a marketing perspective, we want to be able to say we can't disrupt the technology. We are able to definitively provide you with biomarkers that will indeed tell you that if you measure a coronary at this particular height, you're going to have a coronary obstruction. So we actively went to the FDA and we told them that this is what we want to do, so we're in discussions with the FDA. And I mention that because FDA approval is necessary for reimbursement, which is our goal, to get our own CPT code so this is reimbursable so that everybody in this audience is able to have this procedure. It needs to become standard of care. So Right now, as we're in the market, we're on a subscription. We're also finding that, because to go to Neil's point, because we're disruptive technology, some of the physicians in the hospitals need to take baby steps. They're not exactly sure what to do with us. They're not exactly sure how much to pay for this. They're not used to having med tech in the hospital system. And so we've tossed around, let's say, you only use us for your highest risk cases, because that seems to be the patients that they're the most worried about. And that happens to be about 15 or 20% of their case volume. Incidentally, there'll be over 160 TAVR and TAVR procedures this year alone, and it's growing 20 to 22% year over year, so the market is very large. What if we just take 50, you think if you're 200, you do 200 TAVRs a year, you only want to use us for 15 or 20% of your cases, give us 50, we'll put you on a subscription model, and we'll monitor. In this way, you're getting used to this. The goal is for them, and I know this is maybe an odd way to put this, but the goal is for them to become addicted to the technology, and we're finding that with the accounts that we have right now, when these patients come in and they're very high-risk patients, they don't want to just go in with the blind spots. They're giving us every high-risk patient because they now know that we're able to pick up on things that they just could not have seen on a flat 2D black and white image. So a bit of a roundabout way to answer your question. We're finding that we're in the market as a SaaS-based model. Once we get FDA approval, which will be by the end of the year on 2 of our products, it may need to shift over to a per click because of insurance reimbursement. So it's going to be a wait and see, I think, for us as far as that's concerned. But the goal is a SaaS-based subscription so that it just is an auto renewal, and as we add features to our technology, pricing will increase accordingly. Some of the other valves, we're only talking about the TAVR valve, but there's 4 valves in the heart, and some of the other valves are trickier to simulate and to replace. So we'll price it accordingly.
Are you doing a formal clinical trial?
We did not have to do a formal clinical trial, which is the beauty of this. So our CRO, which is LabCorp or Covance, indicated and did some analysis for us that we are able indeed to enter the market and sell. We are revenue generating, which I think is fabulous just within the first year, under this 21st Century Cures Act. So we are considered software as a tool for the physicians. We won't take on the responsibility of telling the physicians exactly what to do. We're giving them a tool to guide them, because right now it's very subjective. How they do it is based on routine patient imaging, a CAT scan, and they'll look and they'll measure the CAT scan, and it's based on a lot of operator experience. The physicians that are at the Cleveland Clinic or Cedars-Sinai are really adept at being able to eyeball and kind of know what they're going to see, although they still can never ever predict the simulation itself. So we're able to take a look at that and run that through our algorithms and give them much more information, so when they go to those hard team meetings, they don't sit and deliberate for 20 minutes or 40 minutes over what valve to choose, what route to take, where to place it, how high, how low. And the other thing I think that's worth noting is that physicians use the valves that they like. There's 2 major players in the market right now, and some of them have been trained on one or the other valve. This takes the guesswork out of which valve to choose. We want to remain valve agnostic. We do not want to partner with industry on the patient-specific level, though we've been asked for new valve development to work with some of the industry partners. But this is meant to be patient-specific for a reason, and we offer all the valves, all the sizes, all the placements, so that they have a suite where they go into the heart team meeting, and then they're able to have a lot of information to be able to make the right decision the first time.
Yeah, and I can add that the phase 1 products that are already out generating revenue, there are phase 2 and phase 3 products that are in the pipeline that may very well, they are so advanced that they may very well require clinical trials, but that's something in the future.
Are you identifying primarily anatomical variations, or Are
could-
identifying primarily anatomical variations, or is there other things like the physiological part of this involvement? Such as mostly anatomical variations are identifying?
So that's a good question. So, every patient has unique, not only anatomical variations, but also the lesion itself has a lot of variations from one person to another. So in the end, you're basically seeing every patient has a unique anatomy and a unique disease lesion. In this case, these are calcific nodules that are growing on the aortic valve. And our technology uses routine imaging and then extracts the 3D model for that patient, which is a unique 3D model, and then simulates the interaction of the devices to that unique model. So what you said is actually the basis of the entire technology is precision medicine, precision predictive modeling, so that every patient's precise complications that are unique to that patient are caught ahead of time before they find out it's too late.
So, congratulations on all your success. I think it's really exciting to see the blending of predictive technology with medicine. My first question was about the reimbursement codes, and I love the strategy you're deploying on that, so congratulations. And I don't know how many times I've seen physicians actually bring their colleagues over to a booth at a trade show either, so congratulations on that. My question is actually about why you chose Ohio. It looks like you've got some experience in California, which I'm a recent boomeranger from California as well. Why did you choose to start the company here?
Gosh, I love that question. I love it so much. I always say that for me in particular, I didn't choose Ohio. Ohio chose me. And I say that because my dad passed away from complications of heart valve disease. And so it's just, it's very, very near and dear to my heart. And because he went to Ohio State and the technology was born out of Ohio State, I can't help believe that there's some serendipitous energies in the world that brought me to meet Prasad, who had the technology that I know if it would have been available that my dad would have survived from it. And so for me, it's a very personal journey, and I love Ohio. My whole family still lives in Ohio. And I think for us, Prasad was moving his lab. We started the company December 5th of 2019. So you can imagine where I'm going with this story. And Prasad was moving his lab in January of 2020. And so he moved and his lab moved, but his family didn't move. His family stayed in Columbus. And so he was traveling back and forth. And then, as you know, March we had COVID. And I'd only met him, those 2 times, right? So we built the entire infrastructure of the company over Zoom. All 15, 16 months over Zoom. And I feel like I've known him a lifetime, but I think that's a really cool story. And his family never moved. And so we were able to keep the company here. We aligned ourselves with Rev 1, and they were very generous to provide office space for us. And now I call myself bi-coastal, but I did buy a house here, so I think I'm here more than I'm actually in California. Maybe not January through February, but I got through this past year. It was totally fine. But we really enjoy being here in the state of Ohio. So shout out to not only Rev 1, but Ohio Third Frontier. I know that Ohio is really making a push towards becoming, a wonderful tech hub, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus. And I feel that sometimes in life, along with my serendipitous story with my father, I think that you're in the right place at the right time. And I feel like we are, and just so grateful to be in this place at this time when Ohio is, really pushing towards, tech, med tech, biomedical tech. And I wouldn't think about changing and making this company anywhere else.
Hi, thanks for sharing your story with us today. My question is more about your scalability for your product, and also you have access to a lot of patient data. Do you get to utilize that to help refine your algorithm and how you do business and your outcomes? I think it's important that you have access to the data to go forward.
Yes, that's a great question. So with respect to scalability, we have made tremendous progress over the last 12 months. There's actually two aspects to scalability. As a minimum viable product, this was like, year and a half ago, we had to put together the product out of, running the simulations using some commercial tools that are available, and we kind of developed a product that was sitting on the backs of some commercial software. Back then, it used to take days to run one simulation for one patient for just one scenario. Now, what we did over the last few months, or actually a year and a half, is to write our own software to wean away from those commercial software, which are, by the way, very expensive to license. And we've developed everything from scratch, and using the latest technology, which is basically more like physics-driven AI or reduced order models. And now we are at, we can theoretically finish one patient within 2 hours. So we've come an enormous amount of way as far as scalability is concerned. With respect to data, so we are accumulating so much data. So we are running at 20 plus centers. We run on a daily basis. And on top of that, all of these centers are opening up retrospective data sets for us. So it's not only just prospective, but we tap into the retrospective. All of those go into our AI algorithms as well. So just as a high level, the simulation not only simulates how the device interacts with the anatomy, but from that simulation result, we are able to predict the clinical event like thrombosis or coronary occlusion or a rupture of the blood vessel. Those events need some training. So these retrospective data sets help us train the algorithms so that it accurately captures the predictive capacity.
All right, we have room for one more question.
Thank you so much. I want to tell you guys your story is very inspiring to me as a co-founder of a SaaS healthcare technology platform. So I really appreciate everything you're saying. It's very inspirational. I know you mentioned that you follow the patient through their journey from the beginning to end to help them make better decisions. And I think you mentioned sharing the decision making, sharing the risk decision making. In the industry I come from, home health and hospice, we describe that as longitudinal care. How are you sharing that care between the physicians and the family members right now? Sharing the decision support.
So, for structural heart patients, shared decision making is how they deliver care. So most of the times what happens is the physician will sit down with the patient, and some of these patients are very elderly with other issues, including some with dementia. So family plays a big role in all of the decision making. So we have had many times where physicians have asked us, hey, can we share your report, which normally has videos and animations and interactive 3D content with the patient's family. So the physician would literally basically walk the family and the patient through, this is basically your heart you're looking at, and this is how the device is going to interact with your own valve. Here are the decisions, how would you want us to take this? And they're fully informed because the physician is able to say, if we choose this path, here are the risks, and the simulation is telling this is the risk of a coronary obstruction. We think you really need to go to open heart surgery, and sometimes, even though the patient and the family doesn't want the chest cracked open, the simulations help everybody in this scenario saying that this is the right thing to do for that patient. I hope I addressed that question.
Let me add on, Prasad. I think also what you're getting at is what happens next, right? So typically what we're seeing is that when a patient chooses a physician to undergo this type of surgical procedure, they stay with the same physicians. And so I think going forward, part of our growth as a company is to be able to track that as well. We are probably 4 or 5 months away from an app that we will be able to have on a handheld. And so I would imagine, and we haven't worked through all of the details, but the patient's family will have access to their own information on that app, as well as the physicians who will be able to take that app and refresh what they've seen. Oftentimes, these are not emergent, most of the time they're not emergent cases, so they'll review in the heart team a week or 2 or possibly 3 weeks ahead of time. So the goal would be to have it in a handheld so they can pull it up right before the procedure and review it again.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you all for coming. This is the best turnout that we've had yet since coming out of Zoom only, and so it's so wonderful to see you all here. It's so great to hear your story. I loved every second of it, so thank you both so much for sharing and for taking the time to answer questions so thoughtfully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.